Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. It is 3:01 Central Texas time. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and you are back again. Thank you for being back again. It's this streaming game requires that you think about, hey, what's going on in the community? What do they need? And what is going on that can bring some perspective in a time that is so dark? Because you know what? Everything is getting exposed to the light. And so, I'm a person who thinks deeply about things. I pray. I go, you know what? What is this thing all about? This whole shooting match that we're in called life. I got a call today from the school, and one of the seniors that is in my daughter's class died in a car accident. And of course, overwhelming to the kids at school. And this was one of the kids that was in my crypto class. And I think I've told you before that I asked the kids, I said, take a piece of paper, kids. These are 17-year-old boys. And I said, on one side, on the left side, I want you to put the day you were born. And then I want you to then put a point at the other end of the paper, and that is the day you will die. And you need to pick that day because you know the day you were born. And this is a great exercise that you can do. And there were two boys in that class, and this was one of them, one of the boys that died today. And he said, yeah, I don't know what it's all for. I don't know that I'll live past 30, he said. And I was shocked by this, and I told you on the stream. And, unfortunately and sadly, the kids are mourning his death today. And, when these type of things happen, it happened when my dad passed away, and it happens when any tragedy happens in our lives, is we take stock. We think about what in the world is this thing all for, right? Especially as you get older, you go through things and you're like, man, not looking any younger. And boy, these red candles keep on, appearing. So you have to have perspective. And so hopefully you come to Crypto Heartbeat to get a bit different perspective about, this crypto marketplace and all that, because something unique is happening in the world. And I believe that this is something that is extremely significant. And I think you actually have a role to play in it. I certainly see that I do as well. And it's something that could be redefining of our future. But it requires that we are of one mind. And you think about that and you're like, I've heard that before, this idea of being unified in thought. It's only during crisis eras that things are reborn. We know about the phoenix that rises from the ashes, right? Things burn down. It's a constant story of renewal, right? Because we are temporary people. We know that this will soon end as well. You will turn to dust. And the question is, why in the world are you here? And as you think about that young man who passed away this morning, and you think about your own life, when you were born and the day you will die, and maybe you'll see the next bull run, but there's no guarantee. You kind of have to think about what is the purpose of this whole thing. So today we're going to be talking about the DeFi Commonwealth, and we're going to use the term Commonwealth. We're going to dig into it, and I want you to see something from the perspective that I got this morning. And so first, we're going to say hello to you, and then we'll get into the whole point of this whole stream. Godfather J6 number one, once again, it takes a lot to get ahead of Godfather J6. It's good to see you. David Lee, all the way from Southwestern Indiana. It is good to see you, my friend. I know that's a big day for you, and I look forward to chatting with you, my friend, and I hope all is well. This is the guy who traveled 7.5 hours from Southwestern Indiana to come to my dad's funeral, and he is an example to us all. So thanks for all that you do, Mr. David Lee. Magnus, what's going on? Drix is here, Mobius, and what's that? Ryan Hungate in the house. Aren't you supposed to be working? The strongest man in all of Hexico. Cookie, the Chocolata. Hello, Matt. Hello, fam. Finbear. What is going on, man? Thanks for being here and saying hello. I know it's got to be getting into evening time, your time, getting ready for bedtime. Flippin' Twit. Hello, all from Ontario. Nice. Ontario, Canada. Extravagant taste. Hey, all I can say is I'll catch the replay, but want to say hi. Thanks for stopping in. Torin, what's up? What's up, family? Vibra Finance CEO. What's up, fam? Diamond Hands. Let's go. Hold on. We got Torin. We've got Vibra Finance. We got My Online Ghost. This is fantastic. We got the whole crew here. Hex on Air. Do Hex Force One. Academaciated. Almighty Hexagon. That is fantastic. It is good to see you. You can work and listen at the same time, I'm sure. All right, so let's jump into it. So let's look at it. I was challenged with the word Commonwealth, and you probably know the Commonwealth of Virginia, right? You know that the Commonwealth is a term as it relates to a number of countries, right? The Commonwealth of Nations. But I want to talk about this as it relates to DeFi and to what's happening in the world right now. And I want you to see something that I saw earlier, and hopefully I'll do it justice. So let's share the screen. And then we're going to talk about Richard Hart. All right, where am I? Bard. There we go. This is AI. All right, hopefully you can see this. If not, you're just going to have to trust me on it. The word Commonwealth is a compound word. Well, we know that. That comes from the Old English word common and wealth, obviously. The word common means belonging to everyone. Okay, let's think about that for a second. Common in this context means belonging to everyone. Hey, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? What belongs to everyone? This interesting thing about DeFi, isn't it? Public, transparent. Okay. So this is something that belongs to everyone. There's this idea of open source software. There's this thing about liberty and freedom. And the word wealth means prosperity or well-being. So think about this as a context, because words mean a tremendous amount. And what we'll talk about after this is Richard Hart and what he is hoping words will mean in his case with the SEC. But I want to talk to you about what are the origins and what is the opportunity that we have here with this whole Pulse Chain ecosystem, with this whole DeFi thing. Is it just another thing? Is it just crypto? Is it just a series of coins? Is it just a bunch of logos? No, it's not. It's actually something that's quite fundamental to the structure and order of the entire creation that we find ourselves in the middle of, right? Some people say, hey, this is a simulation, man. Well, it might be. Right? It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And that was proven to me today. But this idea of commonwealth, meaning belonging to everyone. So this is prosperity or well-being that belongs to everyone. So let's think about that. Are you upset when somebody else prospers? Are you upset when somebody else is doing well? No, you're not. Interesting. Well, hopefully you're not. You're not a jealous or envious type. But the idea that everyone would be kind of doing okay is not a bad thing, that we would prosper or that we would be feeling well or doing well. I think there's a general understanding when you really boil down and get away from Twitter and you get away from things and you go walk by the ocean or you just kind of look up at the stars or acknowledge creation. I mean, think about just the very nature of chemistry in your body. These things that are around us are miraculous. I mean, think about your eyes, your ability to focus, the cones, the rods, how it processes light. Then think about the absolute, extent of the universe, right? light traveling at 186,000 miles per second, right? Billions and billions of galaxies. Interesting that we find ourselves in this place at this time. Well, do you believe that there's a purpose for you? And if so, what does it mean to contribute to that in a community? Because whether you see yourself in a community or not, whether you live in a hole somewhere or you're off grid or whatever, you know that we're not alone in this experience. I mean, we went through the Charlie 19 and everybody kind of understood the same thing. Wow, this is fragile when people go through challenges like wildfires or deal with all kinds of weather events or earthquakes, or where towers fall. There are these things that bring us together when things are serious. And it also, when someone passes away like this morning, it reminds you of your own humanity. It reminds you of the fragile nature of life. And then we think about the things that we argue over and the things that we fight about. And it's generally, we're fighting over things that are trivial. But if we're people that understand what's about to happen, that money is becoming digital, that everything is converting over, and this whole economic system that we've been built on, fractional reserve banking, is going to crumble and fall. Fiat is going to go to zero. Well, they're trying to figure out and prop up a system that hopefully extends its life, right? Look at the BRICS countries. The BRICS countries, they literally got together and said, we're going to expand and we're going to bring in people like Saudi Arabia. We're going to bring in 40 other countries and we're going to hold 81% of the world's oil and gas. They want to have more power. And then along comes DeFi. And this is why I want you to see how important and significant this is, because there's something really special that happens when people are willing to let go and to give things away. And in the early days of America, the early days of society in the West, this idea of a commonwealth, right? We want to set up things so that people have an opportunity to have something that belongs to everyone and creates prosperity. So let's continue this. So the literal meaning of the word commonwealth is the common good or the prosperity for all. Commonwealth is not communism, but it's a general term about what if things were good for everybody? We know that the poor will always be with you, but is there a structure or a system or a way of living that could be better for all people? Well, you assume that the original intent of that is good. So let's continue. The word commonwealth was first used in the 15th century to describe a state or political community that was founded for common good, not for common bad, not for common control, but for common good. In the 17th century, the definition of commonwealth expanded to mean a state in which the supreme power is vested in the people, a republic or democratic state. So the core of this idea of this Western world and society is built on the back of kind of this individualism, but also the understanding that we have to live as neighbors and there is a common good. The Commonwealth is still used today to describe a number of different political entities, including the Commonwealth of Nations, a group of 54 independent countries that were part of the British Empire, a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or Virginia, the great rags to riches hails from. The term Commonwealth also sometimes used as a synonym for republic or democratic state. So what's interesting about this is what we find ourselves in the midst of today is a challenge to the Commonwealth. So what we see being challenged today is the idea of a commonwealth. Well, one of the things I think is important to recognize is that when the founders of America, and there were many, many scholars at the time who realized that they wanted to do something differently. And of course, these ideas of commonwealth influenced them. And of course, their faith influenced them. Their experiences in life, definitely influenced them. But what's really interesting is you see this in the Declaration of Independence. We find these truths to be self-evident. What is self-evident? What are the things that are obvious? That all men are created equal. Okay. and they're endowed with certain inalienable rights. Okay, so what is an inalienable right? This is a right that you have that is obvious to everyone. And those include the freedom of speech, of movement. You could extrapolate transaction, privacy. And so, what's happened over the years is we've created structures in which we said, you know what, these things, we find these things to be self evident. But I want you to understand the Constitution of the United States of America, that is a derivative of Federalist Papers and all the thinking that came and all of the intellectual folks previously was built on this idea of a commonwealth for the common good. What I think is really interesting is that when you recognize the sovereignty of the individual, which is you and me, and you realize that what created this government that we're under, whatever government that you're under in the West, at least, is that it was actually built on the consent of the governed. So we came together, a group of representatives and people at the time, and we said, you know what do we think is going to provide us life, liberty, pursuit of happiness? And you think about that. What is liberty? Well, I guess it's this freedom to make my own choices and to do my own things. So the opposite of liberty is tyranny. What is tyranny? Well, this is where someone else makes choices for you and dictates these things. And here's what's interesting. There is a misunderstanding in this world that the authority that the government has is absolute and that we are under the Constitution. I want you to understand something. We are not under the Constitution. We created it. It exists based on our consent. We are the sovereigns, not the state. You do not get your rights from the state. You get your rights from a creator. That's how it's outlined. And so Richard Hart has been posting a ton of things about legal stuff as it relates to the Supreme Court cases. And I think what is really fascinating is we're seeing the intellectual Richard Hart. And here's something that I find really fascinating. People get all worked up. They're like, oh no, the SEC stuff. You know what? This is all a part of the plan. And I don't mean part of Richard Hart's plan that he's just some 4D chess genius, although he is. But I think this is a really important point in human history. Look around the crypto space and tell me who is actually principled. I didn't say moral. I said principled. Who actually understands and thinks about and has thought about since the beginning of what we're actually doing together. And I think someone like Richard Hart has thought about, long before we have, what is this thing that we're doing? Because when you think about this commonwealth, DeFi is one of the most disruptive things to come. It's the first time in human history when political power and financial power get separated, right? So think about the state. The state thinks it's the sovereign. It is not the sovereign. Why? Because it's under the authority of the people, because the people created it. So there comes a time in human events when you have to either abolish or change these things. You've heard those things. We are the ones who created it. It only exists because the sovereigns, us, created in the image of God with rights that are self-evident, given to us by a creator. You cannot take these things away. No court, none of those things. These are inherent and obvious. Now, are there tyrannical people? Are there corrupt people? Are there corrupt judges? Absolutely. But the very foundation of the civil society is built on the back of this idea that you as an individual are a sovereign person. You have liberty, not based on what the state says, based on you having life and you breathing. And what we've forgotten about, and I think what most young people and old people think, is that we are wards of the state, that we are given our rights by the state. And that's not true. We actually get to choose, hey, how do we want these things to work? And what is the system? Well, we recognize that the system has gotten so gangly. So what are some examples of that? Number one, we have off budget items, right? There's what, $1.4 trillion that the Department of Defense cannot account for annually. Oh, maybe there's some black projects. Oh, we're like, yep. The CIA is doing their thing. They don't report to anybody. There's no transparency. Okay. The entire bureaucratic state. How many people work for the government, right? And how do they regulate? Well, they don't make laws a lot of times. They just create new policy rules, and they weren't elected. And so what's happened is this system that we're under, that was intentionally meant for our common good, our common wealth, our common prosperity, has gotten so gangly and so out of control and so ridiculous that the people are now singing songs about how bad it is. Oliver Anthony did an incredible song, Rich Men North of Richmond. That is a symptom of the problem. It tells you what's going on. And earlier today, or last night, we saw Trump on Twitter or X right on top of the Republican debates, which was genius. Things are changing dramatically. Media in this country is literally, I think the death knell was last night when 76 million people after 4 hours watched Tucker Carlson rather than Fox News. Independent journalists, people like the support that Elon Musk is giving to independent journalists, people like Matt Taibbi and David Grush and Whitney Webb and all of these people who are out there who are actually getting their voices heard. And then people like amazing, this song and artist, Oliver Anthony, is getting what, like, no one has ever come out of nowhere and reached number one, both on iTunes and the Billboard charts. It's a sign of the times. So this overgrown bureaucratic state has convinced you that you are a ward of the state, that your rights are given to you by the state. And here's Richard Hart. You think, oh, Richard Hart's a crypto founder. No. Richard Hart is a revolutionary, and he's fighting for all of us. So let's take a look at what Richard has said, because I think it is significant in the context of our common good. This is how we push back on authoritarians. This is how we push back on globalists, and this is how we push back on tyrants. You should not be afraid. You are the sovereign. You actually have rights. But the only way in which we can push back is if we test them. And it's being tested right now. And so the support that we provide, you watch, folks. You watch. All right, let's take a look at what Richard Hart has to say. And he's done this as of about an hour ago. Let's take a look. And of course, we'll go backwards in this. Why all the legal tweets? Because these cases specifically, your constitutional rights didn't exist 1,000 years ago. And only through the vigilance of the recent courts have they been defended, because organizations over time desire more power, not less. The check the judicial puts on the executive is the only thing preventing tyranny. Okay, so what is Richard Hart saying? I'm fighting, number one. Awesome. Thank you for fighting for all of us, Richard. 2, he's doing his research, and his attorneys are doing their research. But what are they really boiling it down to? And I'm just going to summarize. If you haven't read these documents and you don't know what he is putting up, what he's basically saying is, when you create something, and I love when Richard talks about drawing a picture of a pony, because he's creating this illustration to us, literally, that what you create is your property. And so when you think about what is, in a lot of these cases that he outlines here, and we can just look at them real quick, are things like, he says blockchain. You do some math, you publish the results publicly with a timestamp, period. It's speech and publishing. So he's making that case. He says, well, where is that backed up? How is that backed up? Well, peer-to-peer speech. Well, what is speech? Computer code is speech. And what he's doing is building this case. You have a right to financial privacy. You have a right to say speak your mind. And think about this. We think that this is a case about hex and pulse chain. That's what we think. We're like, oh yeah, this is a case about this. Oh, no. This is potentially a significant case as it relates to anything you may do as a sovereign citizen. Not even that's even wrong. This is an oxymoron. As a sovereign, not as a citizen. You have certain rights. The question is, do you live in a place where they will defend them or not? All ideas having even the slightest redeeming social importance should be protected. So here's the question. You put a lot of hope and faith in this. At the fundamental level, the court doesn't have the authority, but this is the next step of defense for Richard. All right. So what do I think will happen? I think Richard Hart is doing something that potentially will get him the glory, because right now everybody wants to dunk on him, right? Oh, yeah, you did this stuff and that stuff, and we're going to dunk on you. But here's the thing that's interesting. And I think about Erica Wall as kind of the epitome of the person who wants to dunk on Richard Hart, call him fat man or whatever, and thinks that hurts his feelings. Meanwhile, Richard is sitting there going, okay, fine. I'm still going to do something that actually protects you. What is he doing? He's testing the very fundamentals of the Bill of Rights, right? These basic things. And what is interesting to me is he saw this at the beginning of the pulse chain sacrifice. You are going to sacrifice for the freedom of speech. He knew this stuff ahead of time, folks. He knew that his computer code was protected speech. He knew, and he makes a really good point in those tweets. You think you have crypto in your wallet. How many times does Richard have to tell you, and I tell you as well, you actually do not have any crypto in your wallet? And most people are like, what are you talking about? I've got crypto in my wallet. No. You do not have crypto in your wallet. Let me remind you again. You do not have crypto in your wallet. You have keys that give you permission to write on the blockchain and do math. That's what he's making the point of. It's your action. And your action of publishing is your speech. And then he's extending it. It's a financial related issue and there's privacy there. So your speech as a sovereign is protected because we find these things to be self-evident. These are these rights. So what's interesting is the SEC wants to say, well, you didn't register. Okay, fine. You can say that. But what are we talking about that we're doing as sovereigns, as independent people? We're exercising our rights to communicate, to associate, to move, to transact. And here's what's interesting. Someone has to push back on this overreach. And that's what Richard's doing. And I'm so proud of him, actually, that he would actually be defending us, because you watch, it's possible that this case will be way more than, oh, you spent 12 million bucks on, watches and diamonds. Oh, okay. Show me the receipts. Prove it to me. Show me the hashes. Let's go. Hello, prove it. But more importantly, it's something that actually could go down in history as one of the most significant cases as it relates to technology and computer code and speech, that we establish it once for all, because the case hopefully will be able to be argued on these terms. Folks, I want you to imagine a future. I want you to imagine a future where there is a digital ID that you have to carry around. And if you're going to travel in the outside of the United States in the next 5 years, get ready. Got a digital ID, and you have a social credit score, and you have a government wallet, because that's the only way that you're going to get your stimulus money. Okay. And the government has basically said, we're doing a central bank digital currency because we want to control the money. And we see this independent Bitcoin thing, which we think we've got a kind of a handle on, because all of our friends that are, cronies have enough, amassed enough of it. And so what are they doing? They're attacking and fighting us, right? Because they see and they're threatened. The question is, if there is any kind of justice in this world, it's going to be put on full display in this case. And imagine this future. There's all of these, you've been basically, I don't know, you've been kind of headlocked into this. What do I mean by that? The next Charlie 19 comes around, which they're already planning for, and things are difficult and they shut things down or lock things down and you can't function and you don't have money and people are living on the absolute edge and they know that. Look at what they're doing with the people in Maui, right? $700. They're giving people $700. I was listening to, I don't know if it was RFK or who it was, and they said, if you work all your life, Social Security will give you about $1,400 a month. But if you come over here from another country and you cross the border and you say, hey, I want to be an asylum seeker, you get $2,200 a month. And then if your house burns down, the government will give you $700, but they'll give what? 140 billion to Ukraine? Unsustainable, my friends. People know this. They know this very fundamentally. This is unsustainable. And it almost spits in your face. So what is your, how do you push back on this stuff? How do you contribute to a Commonwealth? Well, DeFi. And what Richard Hart is doing is so much more significant than the hex price. It's so much more significant than the pulse price or the pulse X price. Because here's what happens. You think it is all lost and it's all dead and oh, it's all gone. It's all failed. Oh no, it's a dud. And really what you don't realize is there's a catalyst for all of this stuff. And the question is, did Richard Hart actually know that if he did all this crazy stuff, he'd draw attention to himself so that he could actually set the new precedent and literally force the hand of people to say, let's actually look what we're really actually doing. We do not have possession of these coins. They're out on a public ledger. There is no possession. There's no ownership. Having keys to something is not possession. Okay, there's one thing. Well, the only way people seize, Bitcoin or whatever, and he brought up the case about OFAC compliance, right? That it was illegal search and seizure. You didn't have probable cause when you came to try to seize what I had. And you used this list to say, well, you're on the list, so you must be bad. And here's the thing, folks. I'm hopeful that sensible people within the courts, and there's not many of them, but does this go all the way to the Supreme Court? And the Supreme Court literally looks at this and goes, yep, we recognize speech in music. We recognize speech in writing. We recognize political speech. Okay, so you guys got together as a community and you decided that you were going to write and do some math on a blockchain. So here's the question. Whose property is it? And I think if you go right to the very core of value, you say, so when I sacrificed for Pulse, understanding that I was sacrificing for the freedom of speech, did I sacrifice the government's money? No, I didn't. Because the money that I had was an extension of me, my private property. It was my proxy for labor. I was given money for labor and I decided to give it as a sacrifice for the freedom of speech. And when I did that, I literally, sorry about that. When I did that, I literally made a statement, a political statement. But what Richard is saying is the very nature of you publishing and doing math and writing to the blockchain is your speech. Now, the financial rules of not taking or not registering a security, I understand, but it doesn't stand up to the Howey test. And this idea of if you, in fact, sold token in an ICO, you had some sort of investment contract. I will give you this if you give me money. That's what it's all about. What is an ICO? Initial coin offering. You give me money, I give you a coin. Here's our contract. This is how much coin you get for this amount. Now, they're going to say, well, if it looks like a duck, it's got to be a duck and it's a scam. I understand that. But I think that this goes deeper to this. And if he's got the right kind of lawyers, and hopefully, Richard isn't thinking he's so smart that he can defend himself in court, but he actually has really, really good attorneys that really know their stuff. And it sounds like he might. That this is actually has the potential to be a defining case for the future of our rights and for the future of money. Do you imagine what would happen when Richard wins this case and it's public? We thought the movie was good. Well, the movie kind of came and went. We'll see if it goes onto a streaming platform. And in some cases, I'm okay that it doesn't get more play, to be completely honest with you, because I think that this fight is so much more significant than the challenge of, let's say, XRP, because those things are really clear. There were ICOs. This is different. It made it very clear there was no contract. It was very, very clear that there was no expectations. And I don't mean in a casual way. It was over and over and over repeated. This is a political statement. Very, very, very clear. And I'm sure you can get some people who will say, well, I feel like I was wrong. Well, yeah. But folks, I want you to understand the implications of this. The implications of this is not only the redemption of Richard Hart and some glory, but it's also the redemption of you and the protection of our rights. We have somebody that's out there fighting for it who's wicked smart. Richard Hart is a smart person. And you know what? I wouldn't want anyone else defending our right to our sovereignty, which is really these rights that were given to us by a creator, not by a state. So what does this look like? And why is this important? And why am I even streaming about it? Because this idea of Commonwealth that really happened in much simpler times is where we are again. That we as folks, whether you consider yourself a Hexican, a Texican, a Furian, or whatever, insert your community of choice, is that we are building digital nations. We are actually creating a new world, and we're creating a new economic order. That new economic order is one in which we have a common wealth, meaning each of us has an opportunity to participate at the same level. The beauty of DeFi is the fact that you have immutable contracts on the blockchain. It's you, your keys, and a public ledger. When you engage with that, right now you speculate. But as things mature and as crypto grows, it's not going away and disappearing, because people will just leave the United States. If that's the issue, they'll just go elsewhere. This is not going anywhere. But the opportunity is one that's global, because countries right now that are kind of in bed with the central banks and they're interested in the centralization of power. I believe that there are going to be countries who stand up in the future and say, we're going to invest in DeFi. Well, why in the world would you ever do that? Because DeFi is truly in defiance of centralization. Decentralized finance, what does it really mean? It means that we have a shot at a commonwealth. Now, does everybody participate in it? No. Does everyone see it? Is it all about Hex and T-shares? No. But Hex and T-shares is a part of it, because it is the fundamental principles which give you an even footing. Your daddy doesn't have to be in a hedge fund, and you don't have to be from BlackRock in order to participate. So what I think is really coming is, rather than people like El Salvador saying, we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender, I think there's going to be leadership in this world that actually embraces DeFi. And imagine this scenario. Imagine a country said, you know what? We're going to give this away to the people. You are like new founding fathers and mothers of our new economic system. Our new economic system is going to be based on decentralized finance. This code that we have, we don't have control of it. It's not a central bank. We are going to actually back this with real world assets like gold and silver and oil and gas and land and whatever it is, real world assets backing this. And we are going to give this away. And at the beginning, right, it's going to be extremely low. And you get to invest in the people of our country. You get to have a piece of it. And this sounds very familiar. It's like when they settled the West in 1862. The Homestead Act, Abraham Lincoln signed it. And you could get, 160 acres? That's how they settled the West. It was an airdrop. But imagine you were able to get into the beginning of a new nation's wealth creation system. And I think that there's an opportunity in this world, if things are backed by real world assets, to embrace DeFi in a way that literally frees the captives. So, why is the Pulse chain so important, Crypto Heartbeat? Because there's not anyone that I can see right now that isn't just giving lip service to DeFi. Everyone I see out there outside of Richard Hart is somebody that would compromise their principles if BlackRock came along and said, hey, let's partner. Every one of them. Every one of these people would say, I'm going to watch out for myself over you. And Richard would say, nope, I understand that if I don't advocate for others, I may win, everyone else would lose. He understands fundamentally the game theory that John Nash received the Nobel Prize for in 1994. It's called the Nash equilibrium, and it's influenced all kinds of negotiations. It's the idea of where win-win comes from. What if I consider others in addition to myself? So I'd be remiss if I didn't share some biblical knowledge with you on this stream. When Jesus was asked, what are the most important commandments? He said there were two. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. What did he mean? He said those are the most important ones. Okay, that kind of simplifies things. What is loving your neighbor as yourself? Well, it's kind of DeFi. It's kind of defending people's right to speak and to move and to transact. Well, why? Why don't you just, settle and just, go out onto the beach? That's not what Richard's purpose is in life. And I don't think it's mine, and I don't think it's yours. We have the opportunity to strengthen something, right? This layer one called Pulse Chain will never sell out. It will be and is properly decentralized. And you may be crying in your soup right now because the price is so far down. But here's the thing, folks. When they continue to come, and all the tyrants that are trying to centralize authority and not let this thing get out of the bag, it's already out. We're going to see leadership in this world stand up, and it's starting right now, right? Everyone talks about Bitcoin, man, it's decentralized. It's not. Decentralization is truly when people have an equal footing, right? People have amassed all of this Bitcoin. They've done it to control it. The opportunity, in my opinion, is in true decentralized finance. And it has to be, in my opinion, in community or from a state, a community of people who says, no, this is what we're going to use in the future. I do think the future of DeFi needs to be backed by real world assets. And I do think that there needs to be leadership in the world that's going to say, no, we're going to let the people settle the West, right? Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s, when the Homestead Act came out, didn't say, let's enslave people and make them settle the West. No, they used incentive to do it. Well, what was the incentive? Hey, if you're willing to go tend the land, you can keep it. Wow. I think it was $1 an acre, something like that. It was really inexpensive. And it was this airdrop of land. That's how you give incentives to people. Well, one of the greatest things is, imagine a country said, you know what, we're going to have this contract. It's going to have trustless yield, right? And you have a contract within your country to say, we're going to restart our economic system. And it's going to be fair, but it's going to be based on your participation. There's no handouts in this system. It's how much you're going to invest in this system. But it's going to be an immutable contract on the blockchain that even we can't change. And couldn't you imagine someone actually having the foresight to say, you're going to actually give away the economic value to the people? And you know what I would say to that is, well, all that's getting put into it is their labor anyway, because there's no value in this world that's not from human labor. Nothing exists that didn't at some point get created as an idea in the mind of a man or woman. That's what's so incredible about this. We have this amazing opportunity to reshape the entire economic system. And we've got somebody who understands it fundamentally and is being tested. And what does he say? I'm going to fight for the Commonwealth. Folks, it's just getting good. It is just getting good. And I would love to give Richard Hart the credit like he is, he is from Braveheart, right? You're not William Wallace. William Wallace is 10 feet tall and shoots lightning bolts out of his arse. Well, that's probably what Richard Hart is going to have a legacy of. You're not Richard Hart. Why? Because this legend that will be growing is one that is going to give him credit for seeing this stuff all in advance. And he'll probably take credit for it too. That, yeah, I knew this would happen and I knew I would attract attention and I wanted them to come after me for this sacrifice. And I did it on speech and movement for a reason. And you know what? People, they stepped up. Think about this. $1.6 billion was given in sacrifice for speech and movement. Yep. Why? It literally has set up the stage for this type of thing to happen. The question is what will the decisions be? We see the folks in Tornado Cash, right, being imprisoned. If you read a little bit deeper into that case, they may not have a leg to stand on based on some of their actions, not just writing computer code, but they have to prove that. The same thing with Richard Hart. But I want you to understand what it's defending. And I think that you want to see something greater than any movie could be, is literally Richard Hart testifying in front of Congress, his case going to the Supreme Court, and a decision being made that's in line with all the other decisions. It's not the first time somebody said, hey, I have the ability to speak. I am a sovereign person. I have rights that don't come from you. I can choose to write to the blockchain if I want to. If I want to throw my money in a hole, my choice, not yours. You don't own my labor. It's my private property. I can burn my money. I can bury my money. I can give my money. I can buy stupid things with my money. I can shred my money. I can eat my money. And in this case, I sacrificed my money for speech, for movement, with zero expectations. Now, it just happened that you got an airdrop based on what you sacrificed. There's no investment contract. And, the question is, legal people would say, well, what was the intent of this? And, it'll look at people that can call themselves victims. And one of the things that bothers me the most is that there are some influencers that got contacted by the SEC and they became whistleblowers. And the SEC gives money to whistleblowers. Was it 10 to 30% of the awards they win? So there have been some Judases in our community who have been contacted by the SEC and are trying to rat them out and trying to get Richard Hart in trouble and trying to, I'm going to win. It's interesting who those people are. I know at least one of them. And what's unfortunate about that is it is a Judas-like thing. You think you're going to win. I'm going to turn over Jesus to the Roman guard. Okay. We'll see how that goes for you. For 30 pieces of silver. It's amazing. The story is very similar. Is that we have people that are like, I win, I get you. And what you don't realize is actually this was intended from the beginning. Is that this needed to come to a head because just like Richard has said many times before, it used to be a federal offense if somebody broke into your mailbox and read your mail. But now with ISPs and digital stuff, someone has to push back on this. This is overreach, but it's also a gray area. And so I'm thankful that there's somebody out there in front that's representing us who's willing to go to the mat. And I'm so thankful that there's somebody who's willing to build and create something that can be the roads and the rails and the infrastructure for us to build on. Because in my opinion, the way I see the future looking, it's not for our commonwealth. It's for our common enslavement. And so I want to invest in a future that is going to be free, that you have the freedom and liberty and sovereignty to make your own decisions, to be able to go where you want to go, to transact with who you want to transact with, to do it freely, without tracking, without a digital ID, without a social credit score. So what are the implications? Well, the potential implications of all of this stuff is that we actually create a non-CBDC digital currency across the world that's backed by real world assets and runs on the pulse chain. And that people from around the world realize that a new common wealth can be achieved by breaking the back of the war machine and separating money from political power. It's a revolution, folks. And Richard Hart is leading it. And we have to come and realize what's at stake. This is what's really going on. You're like, man, when Lambo? Folks, this is like consequential in the very nature of Western society and civilization. This is a new world, and we get to participate in it. And in my opinion, if we do nothing and sit idly by, you will be in a 15-minute city. And if you say the wrong things, they will debit your government wallet. You know it's true. That's what they want, control. Did you realize it was this consequential? DeFi is a promise of a future of freedom and sovereignty that protects the rights that are not given to you by the state, that are given to you by a creator. And I'm so thankful that Richard Hart is boning up on his legal, as well as has the money to invest in a defense. And you watch. I think Richard Hart was designed and created since the beginning of time to do this work. And I think he's known it all his life. This stuff isn't by accident. You're not the descendant of a monkey. You didn't just trip and fall and you happen to be here. There's a reason that you're on this earth. And it's really cool to be a part of such a pivotal time and to support something like the Pulse Chain. But man, Pulse X is down 90%. Hey, get your stuff now, folks. You've wanted this. So many people are like, oh, I wish for 1 penny Hex. Well, you've got it. I mean, think about this for a second. What if Hex goes just to what the all-time high was last time, 50 cents? Buying something at a penny and it going to 50 cents? Huh. I don't give financial advice here. I don't tell you what to buy, but I want you to understand the times that we're living in. The Pulse Chain and all of the things that people are building is, to me, the only place that it'll be the only alternative that people have. So we'll see people go the way of CBDCs. We will see governments, with authoritarians and tyrants dictate to people what they have to do. But you know what? Love will find a way. And I think that as people push back and they have permission to do it and they see others do it. Why do you think this Oliver Anthony song, Rich Men North of Richmond, has done so well? Is because it's literally the song that's been singing in your heart that you can't articulate. And this guy sings it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. What an amazing time we live in. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But it's more consequential than you think. And then I think about the fact that we started the Texan token. Texan token started, long before this. But what's amazing about it is there's a group of people in Texas that now have a DeFi contract with trustless yield that literally can be the thing that they can build on. And I think about, is it possible? Well, yeah, it is. Texas becoming a republic again. We can reboot that system. But I'm going to tell you, folks, this thing is ripping itself at the seams, not because of the Texas nationalist movement, but because of the policies of America. It's going to get messy before it gets better, but we need to be able to step up because we have an alternative. We have an alternative that's more fair and that preserves your rights as a sovereign. Because do not ever forget, we created this thing and we gave it authority. The authority comes from the consent of the governed. We have agreed to be under these rules, and we always have the right to change them or abolish them. No political power is outside of us. All political power resides in the people in this Commonwealth. And that's what I wanted to talk to you today. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you for coming back tomorrow, Friday at 11 a.m. We've got episode 18 with Steve Staggs, and we're going to be talking about this context in the context of creation. So if you're interested in those topics, come on back to the Pulse tomorrow at 11 a.m. Take care of yourself and do not mess with Richard Hart or Texas. Take care, everybody.